It was a typical Saturday afternoon when I left my downtown apartment to head to my father's house. Watering the rose garden, checking the mail, and looking around the house had become part of my weekend routine. It had been 3 months since my father Michael passed away. I still hadn't made the decision to live in the house, but I had absolutely no intention of letting go of this place. As the white shuttered house came into view, I noticed an unfamiliar black sedan parked on the driveway. The car was old, with patches of rust showing in several places. For a moment, I thought maybe someone from real estate had come, but no one would show up unannounced. As I parked my own car cautiously, the front door of the house opened. The first person who stepped out was a young woman I had never seen before. She looked around 18, slender, with long brown hair tied back. But in that instant, a jolt of electricity ran through my chest. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her nose, the line of her jaw. No way. I gasped. She looked exactly like a young version of my father. She resembled him at 18, as I'd seen in old photos, almost shockingly so. She glanced at me with a confused expression, as if about to say something, but then closed her mouth. Then someone I hadn't seen in 18 years appeared behind her. Mom? The word escaped from my mouth before I realized it. My mother, Claire Morgan, had gained weight since 18 years ago, and her hair was now streaked with white, but that calculating gaze of hers hadn't changed one bit. She looked at me and spoke in a tone as if we'd last seen each other only yesterday. Emily, I'm home. You've grown so much. I got out of the car, feeling completely disoriented. This girl is. It's a family reunion. My mother placed her hand on the girl's shoulder. Avery, this is your sister. My heart began pounding like a drum. Avery? Nice to meet you, Avery said in a small voice. I've heard a lot about you from Mom. Mom? I couldn't hide my shock as I stared at her. Explain this. Who is she? Don't tell me she's Dad's. My mother's expression darkened for a brief moment. Avery is your sister. She's Michael's daughter. But 18 years ago, you. My voice trembled. You never said anything about another child. My mother looked away, clearly uncomfortable. There were complicated circumstances. What kind of circumstances? 18 years ago, you left Dad and me to run off with another man. This girl came after that. I raised my voice. Suddenly, all the dots began to connect. Avery's features, her age, and my mother's vague attitude. No way. I gasped. Was this child conceived before you left us? My mother's face turned pale. You were pregnant and still ran off with another man, hiding it from us? My voice trembled. Did Dad die without ever knowing he had another daughter? Emily, that's... Answer me, I shouted. My mother dropped her shoulders in resignation. Your father was always at work, never home. I had my own life. It wasn't possible for me to start a new life while raising Avery. So you raised Dad's child as someone else's daughter? My hands trembled with anger. For 18 years, Dad lived without knowing he had another daughter. And that daughter grew up never meeting her real father. My mother said, Avery is my daughter, your sister, and she has a right to live in this house. A right? My voice dropped low. Yes. There was strength again in her voice. This house belongs to Michael's daughters, not just to you. I took a deep breath. For 18 years, I had imagined this moment. The moment my mother would return, either to apologize or to make some demand. But reality was far more shameless than anything I pictured. Dad left the house to me. I spoke calmly. Legally. Officially. That's a mistake. My mother insisted. Michael's judgment was impaired due to his illness. He should have left it equally to both his daughters. Avery looked up at her mother with worry in her eyes. Mom, what if this is a mistake? Be quiet. My mother snapped. You have rights too. We've struggled for 18 years. We deserve a stable life in this house. I looked back and forth between the two of them. It was clear Avery didn't fully understand the situation. She was just being used as a puppet by my mother. But in my mother's eyes, I saw the same cold determination as always. "Why do you think Dad left the house to me alone?" I asked quietly. "Where were you for the past 18 years? When Dad was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago and started chemotherapy, where were you? When he couldn't sleep at night from the pain, when I was making ice pillows and caring for him, do you know how I felt?" My voice shook. Dad raised me alone. And when he got sick, I stood by him on my own. While you were enjoying your new life, I was living as his daughter, from a 10-year-old child to an adult. And now you show up out of nowhere and claim rights? I had my own life, she argued. But now, it's time to be a family again. Now? I laughed. Now, because it's convenient for you? My mother's expression stiffened. "Emily, this house doesn't belong to you alone. Avery has rights too. No matter how you feel, this is reality." I took my phone out of my bag. "The reality is that you're trespassing on private property." Avery's face turned pale. You've done nothing wrong," I said gently to her. "But Mom, you left this house 18 years ago. You gave up your rights. You have no right to come back now and make demands." My mother stepped forward. "But the truth is, we have more legal means." "Avery, show her the documents." Avery hesitated, then pulled an envelope from her bag. I took it from her and looked through the contents. A forged copy of the deed, a clearly altered version of a will, and paperwork bearing the signature of a lawyer I had never seen before. I calmly returned the documents to the envelope. "This is forgery." "Then prove it." My mother challenged me. Gladly, I began dialing 911. "The police will prove it." At that moment, my mother's expression changed. "Wait, there's no need to make such a big deal out of this." But it was too late. I had made up my mind. The confrontation I had waited 18 years for had finally come. In the end, that day, my mother and Avery left before the police arrived. But that wasn't the end of it. The following Monday morning, while I was working in the office, I received an urgent call from Mrs. Anderson, the neighbor. "Emily, something's happening at your father's house." A big truck came, and people are moving a lot of things inside. My heart began to race. "I'm coming home right now." I told my workplace I had an emergency and left immediately. 15 minutes later, the sight I had feared was right in front of me. A large moving truck was parked in the driveway, and workers were carrying cardboard boxes and furniture into the house. My mother was giving orders while Avery stood nearby, looking bewildered. I parked my car and observed the situation calmly. The workers were clearly professional movers, just doing their job. When my mother saw me, she gave a triumphant smile. "Well, Emily, long day?" She said that in a theatrical, cheerful voice. "As you can see, we've moved in." "Without my permission?" "Permission?" She shrugged. "This is Avery's house too. We have legal documents." One of the workers overheard our conversation and paused his work. "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" My mother quickly cut in. "There's absolutely no problem. This is just a family move-in." I turned to the worker and said, "This house is my property. I did not consent to this move." The mover looked confused. The person who hired us is Claire Morgan. She signed the paperwork as a resident of this address." "I'm Claire Morgan." My mother held out her ID. "And these are the documents for the new resident." She showed an envelope she had just handed to Avery. Inside were forged copies of the deed and other legal-looking documents. "If there's a legal dispute, we can pause the job." The mover hesitated. My mother spoke quickly. "There's no dispute. This is a simple family housing transition. She's 18 now, which means she has the legal right to live here as an heir." I took a deep breath. I needed to think strategically, not act on anger. "All right," I told the mover. "Go ahead with your work." Just be aware that I will be calling the police." My mother's expression darkened. "The police? Isn't that a bit much? This is a case of trespassing and unlawful occupation in progress," I said calmly. "Do you really believe these documents are legitimate?" Avery looked up at her mother. "Mom, are you sure this is okay? If this becomes a legal issue." "It's fine," my mother said firmly. "Everything has been handled legally." But I heard unease in her voice. As the movers continued bringing things in, I pulled out my phone. First, I called a family law attorney. It went to voicemail, so I left an urgent message. Then I called the local police department's non-emergency line. "I'd like to report a case of trespassing and unlawful occupancy. It's currently happening." The woman on the line asked for details. I calmly explained the situation. An attempt to illegally occupy a home using forged documents and a move-in happening without my consent. "We'll dispatch a patrol unit. Please wait at the scene." After hanging up, I saw my mother staring at me. "What did you do?" "I just took the appropriate legal action," I replied. "If everything you're doing is truly legal, then you have nothing to worry about." My mother's face turned red. "Emily, do you even know what you're doing? We're family." "This is a family matter," says the one who abandoned the family 18 years ago. I said quietly. "Where were you when we needed you the most?" Avery's voice trembled. "Did I do something wrong?" I looked at her. This girl clearly didn't understand the situation. She was simply being used by her mother. "Avery, you haven't done anything wrong. But you're being used," I said gently. "You deserve to know the truth." My mother interrupted. "Be quiet. Avery, don't let your sister confuse you." In the distance, we could hear sirens. As the sound grew closer, the atmosphere changed instantly. The movers stopped and exchanged confused glances. My mother's face began to pale. Avery, clearly in a panic, clung to her mother. I remained calm, remembering that I had waited 18 years for this moment. I remembered my father squeezing my hand from his hospital bed and telling me, "If she ever comes back, never give in." "Emily, there's still time," my mother said in a panicked voice. "Call off the police. We can resolve this as a family." "Resolve?" I scoffed. "In 18 years, did you ever once try to talk things out? You didn't even show up for Dad's funeral, and now you want to talk?" The lead mover approached us. "Ma'am, if the police are coming, we'll have to stop the job. We can't risk getting involved in a legal issue." My mother tried desperately to convince him. "Wait, this is just a family misunderstanding. Please keep working." However, the movers had already begun returning the items to the truck. As professionals, it was only natural for them to avoid legal risks. A police car pulled up to the curb and 2 officers stepped out. An older male officer and a younger female one. The man approached. "Who made the call?" "I did." I stepped forward. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm the owner of this house." The officer pulled out a notepad. "Can you explain the situation?" I explained exactly as I had prepared. "My mother and her child are trying to unlawfully occupy my home using forged property documents. They began a move-in without my consent." The female officer approached my mother and Avery. "May I see your identification, please?" My mother reluctantly handed over her driver's license. Avery, her hands trembling, pulled out her student ID. "What's your current address?" the officer asked. "We live in an apartment right now, but we were planning to move in here today." My mother replied, "Do you have any documents proving ownership of this house?" She handed over the forged paperwork. The male officer received it and examined it carefully. "This appears to be a copy of a title deed, but there's no certification stamp. Also, this lawyer's signature." He turned to me. "Who was the executor of your father's will?" I took out the authentic documents from my bag. "Daniel Brooks, attorney at law." This is the official deed, and all transfer procedures were properly completed. The officer compared the two sets of papers and quickly spotted the discrepancies. These documents appear to be forged. He then turned to my mother. Furthermore, you attempted to unlawfully enter and occupy a residence without the owner's consent. My mother's face turned pale. But this is a family matter. I'm the ex-wife, and Avery is his daughter. Being the ex-wife does not grant you property rights. The officer said calmly. You relinquished those rights during the divorce proceedings, correct? My mother fell silent. The female officer spoke gently to Avery. Miss, were you aware of the situation? Avery, on the verge of tears, answered, My mom said Dad left the house for me too. But I never even met him. That statement made everything clear. Avery had no real understanding of what was happening. She had simply been used in her mother's plan. The male officer turned to me. Would you like to file an official report? I took a deep breath. I knew this decision would change my life. But I remembered my father's words and the pain of the past 18 years, and I responded clearly. Yes. I'd like to file charges for trespassing, unlawful occupation, and document forgery. My mother let out a desperate scream. Emily, please. I'm your mother. A title you gave up 18 years ago. I replied coldly. Right now, you're just a trespasser. After the police car carrying my mother drove off and the scene grew quiet, I thought it was over. But I was completely wrong. The real battle had only just begun. About a week later, the day after she was released on bail, my mother began a vicious smear campaign on social media. The first sign came from a concerned call from a coworker. Emily, there's something weird going around on social media. I quickly checked my mother's account on my smartphone. There it was, unbelievable posts lined up in front of me. Titled, A Mother's Confession of Betrayal by Her Daughter, my mother portrayed herself as a victim. My ex-husband, whom I divorced 18 years ago, recently passed away after a long battle with illness. After the divorce, I struggled with mental health issues and spent years in treatment. I knew about his illness, but my own condition was too severe for me to visit. When I finally recovered and hoped to reunite with my daughter and support each other as a family, my eldest daughter called the police on me and treated me like a criminal. My ex-husband's judgment was impaired due to his illness, and it seems our daughter manipulated him into rewriting the will in her favor. The inheritance, which should have been shared equally between our two daughters, was taken entirely by our eldest. All I wanted was to reclaim lost time and live together as a family again. The post even included a photo of Avery. This girl longed to meet her father since she was little. Because of my illness, I deprived her of the chance to build a relationship with him. Now that he's gone, I just wanted her to live in his home and feel close to his memory. If it were truly his will, he would have shown equal love to both daughters. But my eldest daughter exploited her sick father, took all the assets for herself, and treated this child as the daughter of a criminal. Worse still, the post had already been shared over 200 times with hundreds of comments. Many people left sympathetic remarks like, "What a terrible daughter," "Family should come first," and "How could anyone call the police on their own mother?" My hands trembled with rage. My mother had completely distorted the truth and painted herself as a victim. She used vague details to make it difficult for me to refute her claims. The next day, things escalated. My mother posted similar content to local community groups and even used my full name. Emily Carter manipulated her mentally impaired father to monopolize the inheritance and kicked her sister out of the house, she wrote, spreading complete lies. At work and even in the neighborhood, the way people looked at me changed. Those who didn't know the truth started believing my mother's one-sided story. I can't take this anymore. I called my lawyer. You can sue for defamation, but it will take time, the lawyer explained. Publishing the facts may be more effective. You have all the evidence. That night, I made my decision. It was time to stop being passive and start fighting back. I opened my own social media account and began a post titled, Time for the Truth. First, I posted my mother's divorce records, public documents showing she had voluntarily relinquished rights to the house 18 years ago and had refused visitation with me. Next, I shared my father's medical records, proving I had cared for him alone. Then, side-by-side images of the forged deed and the authentic one. Most important of all, I included a photo of the official police report, proof that my mother had been arrested for document forgery and unlawful entry. "This is the truth," I wrote calmly. "A person who hadn't contacted us for 18 years tried to take over my home using forged documents." I simply responded within the bounds of the law. I also included an explanation about Avery. "My sister was a victim of our mother's lies. I truly hope we can build an honest relationship in the future." I attached a photo of my father and me, excerpts from his caregiving journal, and an official statement from my lawyer. The post spread rapidly. This time, the responses were grounded in fact. I'm glad the truth came out. I thought the first post seemed suspicious. "You did the right thing." Even those who had sympathized with my mother began to change their opinions after seeing the evidence. Her post was now flooded with comments like liar, criminal, and shameless. 2 days later, my mother was fired from her job. Her employer had learned about the social media scandal and the criminal charges. She began deleting her posts, but screenshots had already been widely shared. I felt a sense of satisfaction, but also exhaustion. I didn't want any more of this mess. After discussing it with my lawyer, I decided to file for a restraining order instead of pursuing criminal charges. We submitted an application to the court stating that Claire Morgan has continued to harass Emily Carter both physically and online. Several months later, I faced my mother in court. She looked worn down and her former arrogance had vanished. After reviewing the evidence, the judge issued a 3-year restraining order. She was forbidden from coming within a third mile of me, from mentioning me on social media, and from contacting me through any third party. "If you violate any of these terms, you will be taken into custody immediately," the judge warned sternly. As she left the courtroom, my mother glanced back at me once. But her gaze was no longer defiant, only hollow, as if she had accepted defeat. That evening, I sat quietly at home, eating dinner and reflecting on everything that had happened. The social media war had been an ugly battle, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. I wasn't a victim. I was a fighter who had defended her name and her rights. The next morning, I received a short text message from Avery. "I've decided not to have any further contact with Mom. I hope we can talk someday." Smiling, I replied, "I believe time will heal things. You're always welcome." The truth can be painful, but it's necessary. And I would never again be under anyone's control. A year passed. Eventually, I decided to move into my father's house. I gave up my downtown apartment and started a new life in a home full of memories. I carefully tended to my father's rose garden, and in spring, it bloomed beautifully. As for my mother, I haven't had any contact with her since. From what I've heard, she moved to a neighboring state and now works washing dishes at a small diner. Because of her criminal record, finding stable work had become difficult. I didn't hate her. In truth, I felt nothing at all. She was simply a part of my past. Nothing more, nothing less. One spring evening, while watering the roses, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Avery was standing there. She looked more worn than a year ago, but there was a new resolve in her eyes. "Emily, I'd like to talk," she said quietly. I led her into the living room. We sat facing each other by the fireplace, where a photo of our father was displayed. "First, I want to apologize," Avery spoke. "I'm truly sorry for everything that happened a year ago. You were just deceived. You don't need to apologize." "No, I do." She shook her head firmly. "Even if I was misled, it's still true that I hurt you. Over the past year, I've come to realize many things. Most of what my mom told me was a lie." "Like what?" "It was like she was waiting for my dad to die. While he was alive, she never once spoke about me to him. But the moment he passed, she suddenly said, "You have inheritance rights, and your father loved you." I clenched my fists in anger. She had only filled Avery's mind with convenient lies after my father could no longer defend himself. "That's why I wanted to meet you," Avery continued. "I wanted to see for myself what real family was. I secretly looked up where you lived. But Mom found out and pulled me into her plan." "What did she say about me?" I asked quietly. "At first, she told me you were mean and didn't want to accept me as family. But that wasn't true. You didn't even know I existed. Dad didn't know either. It was Mom who kept everything hidden." Tears welled up in Avery's eyes. "For 18 years, I lived thinking I was the child my father didn't love. But in reality, he didn't even know about me." I understood her pain. A girl who grew up believing she'd been rejected by her father, and a man who passed away never knowing he had another daughter. My mother's lies had severed the bond that should have existed between them. "If Dad had known, I'm sure he would have loved you," I said gently. "He was someone who valued family above all else." Avery nodded slightly. "When the call came that Dad had died, Mom said, 'There's no point in going to see him now,' and didn't let me attend the funeral. But the truth is, she was just afraid my existence would be exposed." "Exactly," I said with certainty. "Until the end, she only thought about herself. She kept you a secret while Dad was alive, then tried to use you once he was gone." This girl had been a victim of her mother's lies and selfishness. "How are you doing now?" I asked. "I'm attending community college. I work at a restaurant in the evenings. I haven't had any contact with Mom." "That must be hard on your own." But for the first time, I feel like I'm living my own life. There was a sparkle in Avery's eyes. "Free from my mother's lies." I stood up and took a photo of our father from the mantelpiece. "This is Dad." I handed the photo to her. Avery stared at the picture and quietly began to cry. "Do you think I look like him?" "Yes, very much so." I smiled. We talked about our father for a while. The man I knew. His kindness. His strength. And the love he had for me. Avery listened carefully to every word. "Emily," she said at last, "do you think we can ever become real sisters someday?" I thought for a moment. The pain of the past doesn't vanish so easily. But this girl, like me, was a victim of our mother's actions. And she was the only other person who shared our father's blood. "It'll take time," I answered honestly. "But I think it's possible." Before Avery left, I handed her one of Dad's old books. A poetry collection he cherished. "I'd like you to read it too." She held the book close to her chest. "Thank you, Emily." That night, I sat alone in the rose garden and looked up at the stars. For the first time since the chaos and pain of a year ago, I felt a sense of peace return. My relationship with my mother was beyond repair, and I had come to accept that reality. She had abandoned her role as a mother 18 years ago, and 1 year ago, she tried to invade my life as a criminal. But Avery was different. She was an innocent victim, and also my father's daughter. It would take time to build a relationship with her, but I no longer believed it was impossible. As I stared at my father's photo, I spoke to him in my heart. "Dad, I've grown strong. No one can use me anymore. And as your true daughter, I've protected this home and our dignity." The spring breeze carried the scent of roses. I took a deep breath and felt proud of the woman I was becoming, one who had finally stepped into a new life. The quiet, obedient victim I once was no longer existed. Now I am a woman who knows her rights and has learned how to defend them. And perhaps that is the most important inheritance my father has ever left me.